Down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the number one liquid-fueled, liquid, lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I am your host, Rick. Now, I see a few people have stopped by particularly in the Rumble chat, and I understand that they are going to leave a little early because they have other things going on, but I want to call out in particular, Bam over on Rumble apparently has a high school best friend, and that best friend's son, along with, of course, Bam's daughter, Z. And they are barbecuing and, of course, blasting some 80s hair band music. Now, I can't compete with 80s hair band music. I'm sorry. I just can't. So hopefully that is just a lot of fun for them. They're going to go and do what they're going to do. So anyway, and then I also saw that Music Man's going to hang out for a little bit, before he takes off for doing other things. So, hey, but you know what? I am just so happy that you folks have decided to at least stop in and say hello before you take off. That is just fantastic. That's right, 3 Chevy. I can't compete with 80s hair either. Oh my gosh. Anyway. All right. Well, hey, look, tonight we've got a little bit of a kind of a somber note to the first part of the show. And then of course the, second half, hi Z. Okay. There's a second half of the show I've got to come back to, of course. America, we can only we can only sit so much in terms of world politics and things like that, for this. But, the thing about it is that I think a lot of people don't understand, especially again, here in the West, a lot of people in the West, we look at things and we have, like I was saying on last episode, we have a lot of things that we do or that we require, not only of, our individuals in civilized society, but also things of our military and everything else. Military and everything else, we require a certain set of standards, and it's those kinds of standards that we seem to think that are common across the globe. And one of the things that I think is kind of interesting is when you sit here and you listen to, especially Americans in particular, but when you listen to Americans say, oh, I hate this person, I hate this thing, I hate, etc. And while hate by itself is a very strong word in the English language, none of us, I think, truly understands what the word hate means. And hate is on full display right now in the Middle East. It is on full display not only from the horrific attack on the Israelis and Israel, but also hatred even within the Arab cultures going, between the Arab states. And I've got a little bit more about that tonight, and I definitely want to bring that up. But let's go ahead and let's get our first couple of segments and stuff out of the way. So to start off, we have, of course, tonight's affiliate, sponsor, whatever you want to call them, the Institute on the Constitution. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.whiskeymusings.online, to sign up, and while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.whiskeymusings.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.whiskeymusings.online. Or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution, to support the show, go to constitution.whiskeymusings.online. It is got rounded corners. Some people have called them thecthae. It has 1/8 an inch, roughly, of Saddleback leather, and the pages are water resistant. Look at that binding. That binding is a thread stitch that goes all the way through the leather and all of the pages. I can tell you that this pocket-sized Constitution is buddy tested, buddy approved, Billy approved, as well as my youngest whiskey warrior has proven that its accuracy and content is incredibly informative for those of you who are in the Scouts to get your civics badge. So go to constitution.whiskeymusings.online to grab this wonderful thing, and do it for those folks who may not know enough about the Constitution. It's a great stocking stuffer for that, for them. Coming up, of course, in terms of Christmas, for sure. So constitution.whiskeymusings.online, and of course, go and check out the Institute on the Constitution and their website for all of that other information today. Okay, so I did that first. I forgot, of course, to let everybody know what I was drinking tonight. Tonight is Buffalo Trace. It is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. I am running a little low. Looks like I may need to run off to the store to get some, but I still have a very full bottle of Four Roses, so don't worry. I've got plenty of whiskey to drink. And of course, tonight it is in my Lucky Shot USA.com We the People glass. You can kind of see the words We the People and the frosted American flag next to this, what I believe is a 308 shell going into the glass. And of course, it's a rocks glass, and I have rocks or whiskey stones in the bottom. You can kind of see them in there. It makes the liquid a little darker than what it actually is, but hey, whatever works. Gotta love that whiskey. Oh, yes. You gotta love me. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Next up, of course, is a fan favorite, and it's my favorite too. On this day in American history. And of course, on this day in American history, we read from, or I should say, I read from, the American Patriots Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. It is chock full of all kinds of American factoids, parts, about our historical founding. And tonight we have October 14th, And we're going to talk about somebody breaking the sound barrier. Until October 14, 1947, no one knew if a plane could fly faster than the speed of sound. Aircraft approaching Mach 1 shook violently as if hitting an invisible wall. Only a year earlier, British pilot Geoffrey de Havilland had died when his plane broke apart flying close to the speed of sound. Scientists theorized that as a plane reaches high speeds, sound waves piled up around it, creating a sound barrier that held it back. After World War II, the U.S. military and Bell Aircraft developed the X-1, a bullet with wings, designed to punch a hole through the sound barrier. The test pilot for the rocket-powered plane was 24-year-old Captain Chuck Yeager. A decorated combat ace, Yeager had cheated death more than once. During the war, he'd been shot down over France, but had eluded the Nazis with the help of the French resistance and made it back to his squadron and returned to the skies. By mid-October 1947, Yeager had flown the X-1 several times over the Mojave Desert, edging closer to the sound barrier. On October 14th, he climbed into the plane with 2 cracked ribs from a fall off of a horse, an injury he kept secret so he wouldn't be grounded. A giant B-29 carried the X-1 to 20,000 feet and released it. The plane stalled and dropped 500 feet while Yeager struggled to bring it under control. He fired the rocket engines, climbed to 42,000 feet, leveled off, and fired a rocket again. Then it happened. The shaking suddenly stopped. I was so high and so remote that the airplane was so very quiet that I might have been motionless, Yeager later recalled. But the needle on the speed gauge jumped off the scale. On the ground below, engineers heard the thunder of a sonic boom. Chuck Yeager had punched through the sound barrier. That, of course, is today's On This Day in American History, where we celebrate the man who was the first person to break the speed of sound and go Mach 1. And yes, buddy, that is Chuck Yeager. All right. There are so many things that we as Americans have done in history. In fact, I was watching a Rush video, which, you know, if I'd have been thinking about it, I would have grabbed it for tonight. But of course, you know, the late great Rush Limbaugh, incredible one. But anyway, he was talking about American exceptionalism, and if I can find if you're not following Rush Limbaugh on Facebook, they occasionally post clips from his radio show, which reached 30 million people at one point. He was just an incredible radio broadcaster, sitting behind, of course, the EIB microphone, the golden mic. Ironically, is the same type of mic that I have here, just in gold. This is in black. And, so, if you get a chance to check out his Facebook page and listen to again, I do it every once in a while. And of course, you know, I've got to go back through at times and read through this radio's greatest of all time, Rush Limbaugh. You know, I still have it marked right here. You can barely see it. But I still have it marked. I go through and I read some things on him. Just a fantastic individual. I aspire. He's one of my aspirating heroes, I think, for all of that. Okay. And realistically, I think he would be a little appalled at what's happening over in the Middle East. But we're starting to get some more information coming out, for things like what was the purpose of the attack on the Israelis. As you know, No, it was actually, sorry, Outlaw Dogs. It was actually, she asked on Rumble if it was today. No, it was actually something that popped up in my feed, I think a couple of days ago. But I'm sure you can find it. It's really not that hard, to find. He's got a lot of them. But anyway, going back to, there's been a lot of questions as to what was the purpose of Hamas going in and attacking Israelis. Well, I mean, we know just from all the dead bodies and everything else, it is clearly the whole purpose was to attack the Jewish people in Israel and to kill as many as possible. And then, of course, take captives and stuff. Well, now the Daily Wire and a couple other outlets, but the Daily Wire points out that this actually was the purpose of this attack. And if you look here, it's, quote, top secret. Hamas documents show that the Palestinian terrorists intentionally targeted children, according to a report. There were documents left that were labeled top secret. Of course, they were left because of the bodies that were discovered of the dead Hamas terrorists this week after they launched the unprecedented terrorist attack against Israel. The document showed that the detailed plans the terrorists were given ordered them to target elementary schools and a youth center in Kfar Said, a kibbutz in Israel, and to kill as many people as possible. The documents also ordered the soldiers to take hostages and return back to Gaza as fast as possible. More than 1,300 Israelis were murdered, 3,000 more were injured, as well as over 100 hostages were taken. Now, what's funny is, or what's not mentioned in here, is there were also Americans and French and some other German, other nationalities that were in Israel at the time, because of course the attack happened during a holiday, a religious holiday, and a lot of people went, and a lot of the ones that were killed went to the celebration, the music celebration that was occurring during the holiday, and they were all killed there. That was like the largest area that was hit. Surveillance footage viewed by NBC News lined up closely to the orders that were given in the documents, including the use of specific tactics. They apparently, the documents also showed that they conducted extensive intelligence gathering to carry out their attacks, and that they had specific plans of attack for each village that included the intentional targeting of women and children. Now, for those of you that don't remember, I talked about this last episode, but there were, maybe I didn't say it, but I've been hearing reports that there were from survivors of the attack that there were people, Palestinians, who had work visas to go to these places and work within these villages, and they were recognized by some of their victims as someone who had gone, and yeah, it's one of those things that I think is out there. And then also you got to keep in mind too that Hamas usually, and terrorist organizations are usually not that organized and coordinated. And so this, because of the level of intelligence gathering that was going on here and the level of sophistication of this attack, more and more people are pointing out that this is likely, very likely, to have been planned by some of the Iranian Republican Guard, or whatever they're called. And so, yeah, it's so much that when the NBC News was published, Israeli military officials told NBC News that the level of detail in the maps was enough to cause anyone in the intelligence field's jaw to drop. Now, keep in mind, terrorists typically don't go to a high level of sophistication. I mean, yes, they do plan, but they don't go and plan more often than not. They're more opportunistic, I guess you could say. I mean, in terms of like their suicide bombings and so on and so forth. So this kind of level of sophistication and coordination tends to lend credence to the idea that this was pushed by a outside military level kind of force for it. And another Israeli military official stated that they had never seen this degree of detailed planning for a terrorist attack. So this is, again, kind of pointing out that the Middle East itself is heating up, and, Iran, which is the hotbed center for these things. And also, there's a lot of people out there who are basically saying they're trying to argue the fact that the $6 billion, that the $6 billion money that Biden had released had no bearing on this particular attack. Well, as I discussed in my last episode, that again may or may not have been the case. More likely it was not the case. It was actually enough to spur this on. We also need to understand too, and just to kind of bring it up, I don't know if anybody has seen some of the protests that have been going on. I can tell you that there are all kinds of protests that are happening around the globe, and a lot of them, and by protests, I mean actually support for what the Palestinians or what Hamas did to the Israelis. And to be honest with you, it's kind of sickening to think that there are people in the Western world that are looking at things like this and applauding it. It's just one of those things that we get shocked about, and even like, you can take a look at some of our indoctrination centers known as universities. There's a university not that far from me that actually had a Palestinian support rally, and it disturbed enough of the student body, and they tried to make complaints, especially some Israeli students at this university. They tried to make complaints, and of course it fell on deaf ears. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we do have here in the United States, of course, is the fact that we value things like free speech. And so for someone to sit here and say that they want to stifle that kind of speech versus not stifling maybe something like a pro-Israeli rally, it tends to demonstrate an unfortunate conundrum or catch-22 that we are connected into, because you can't just sit here and be for free speech and then go and stifle speech. So unfortunately, as much as and as painful as it was, to allow someone here in America, particularly, to discuss this or to talk about this or to hold a celebration like that, unfortunately, the principle may have to stand up higher, as distasteful as it is. The principle itself may have to stand up higher than the disgusting display that was being shown on several universities across the United States. Now, if you go and take a look, even in places around the globe, places like France and the UK and some of these other things, well, France actually shut down some of theirs, shut down some of the celebrations that were over there. And so now, there is a question in terms of whether or not there's some serious problems in that particular scenario. But if you looked at the sheer numbers of people that were there, It's scary, and it's enough for anyone with half a brain to kind of take pause. Now, as I stated in my last episode on Wednesday, we were talking about, how BLM jumped on, and all of these others and all these other organizations, they just sort of jumped on the bandwagon. And of course, the challenge here realistically is the fact that whether or not this is, just because they wanted to, they feel like the Palestinians are actually being wronged here, or whether or not it is an actual anti-Zionist function and foundation. There's some questions in terms of the motivation, but there definitely is no question in terms of the messaging that was coming out, which is essentially that these people, they literally are for the killing of what is essentially civilians. And this is what I was trying to stress on my last episode, is that we need to understand here in the West, we need to understand that there is a level of civility that we tend to possess that we try to project onto other cultures. And it's those other cultures that we need to understand they may not want what we want. And so heading out, doing some of the things that America does in order to spread freedom and justice and all this other, there's all of our other values. There's other cultures across the globe that have no interest in this. And no matter how much you sit and try to, purvey or project this across the globe, thinking that we are in the right, we in America are in the right. I mean, we are, but the idea here is that not all these cultures want this. And that's part of the problem that we ran into in Afghanistan. No matter how much we tried to put in a democratic society, okay, it didn't take. It was still a bunch of tribalism, and the idea that which is again part of the horror that you could just imagine what happened when we just up and left. We just pulled out of Afghanistan with no warning, and got, essentially took 20 years, almost a generation of individuals, and just threw them back into what essentially would be third century barbarism, and did it for essentially no reason, and Joe Biden made that decision, or at least Joe Biden's cabinet made that decision, as far as that goes. So this, again, we need to understand, we need to realize here in the West that not everybody thinks like us. And we cannot necessarily project those thoughts, values onto other cultures, believing that that is what they want. Well, unfortunately, that's also a weakness of ours, is that we in the West, we do that a lot. And because we do it, we tend to become targets. We tend to become chumps at times. And especially when you have somebody who's not smart enough to understand that in the Oval Office, we tend to be the laughingstock of the entire world. Now, one good thing that has come out of this, which, let me go ahead and show you this. This came out in the Washington Examiner. I'm going to try and keep people from drinking tonight, because apparently there's a drinking game that every time I say the word POPPED, they go ahead and throw in a drink. So I'm going to try and avoid that word tonight. This came out in the Washington Examiner. And this is a good thing. U.S. officials negotiate a temporary escape plan for Americans fleeing Gaza. And before I get into this, Music Man is asking, sent me a Rumble rant to catch my attention, but asked a question. Sorry for the interrupt, but short on time. Any update on the whiskey hat? No, unfortunately, not at this time. Thank you very much for the Rumble rant, by the way. But no, unfortunately, at this moment, they are still, as far as I am aware, they are still out of stock. So we're going to have to, I'm going to have to either look up alternatives or something. But anyway. All right. So back to the program. So U.S. officials have negotiated a temporary escape plan for Americans fleeing Gaza, which is good. And, you know, to give you an idea, let me go ahead and just bring up the map here of Israel so that you get an idea as to what we're talking about. The Gaza Strip here, and I'm not sure if you guys, let me see if it'll show up. Yeah, it does not. Okay, here we go. So the Gaza Strip, as you can see here, is right along the lower edge of Israel and on the Mediterranean Sea, and is right on the lower edge of Israel and matches up with Egypt for, to its south. And so one of the things that the Israeli Defense Forces have been doing is they've been sending out leaflets and messages and calling people and telling them through press releases and all kinds of stuff. They're attempting to get as many civilians as possible to move south out of Gaza and into Egypt. Okay. And so this is a big problem because of the fact that Egypt has actually clearly made it a point to basically say that the only people that they're going to allow through in Egypt is Americans. Now, these Americans are not necessarily Israeli Americans or anything along those lines. These are Palestinian Americans that are coming through, obviously, because any Americans that are in the Gaza Strip right now are probably being held hostage, which we still don't have a count. To the best of my knowledge, we still do not have a count of how many of those hostages, of the roughly 150 or so hostages, are Americans. That being the case, though, Egypt has made it clear that they do not want to take in any Palestinian civilians that live within the region. In fact, this was stated clearly by Egypt's, I'm not exactly sure what this guy is. They describe him in this Breitbart article as Egyptian strongman Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He was reportedly speaking at a military graduation on Thursday, and he was urging the residents of Gaza to remain on their land rather than attempt to relocate away from the violence of the group Hamas and, of course, the retaliation from the Israeli government. Now, he also made a comment, too, that Egyptians, that are in terms of this, that they actually support the idea of getting rid of Israel. A lot of Arab countries do that. But they also don't want the Palestinians to come in. They're not interested. And they're claiming it's because of the fact that they have a lot of refugees already. But also, here's the thing, when Gaza was actually formed, it was offered by the Israelis to go to Egypt, and they basically said, look, Egypt, why don't you take over this area of the country? In this case, in terms of Gaza, it was like, hey, why don't you take this over and govern it? They didn't want it. Egypt flat out said, nope, we're not interested. And so that's part of how the Gaza Strip was actually put into Hamas's government's hands. Now, the thing about it is with this entire situation, and this is the part that's kind of puzzling to someone who is from the Western world and understand and, thinks about things like peace and so on and so forth, it's kind of a question that needs to run through your head to basically say, why? I mean, these are Palestinians, they're Arabs. Why would the Egyptians say absolutely no way? Well, the Egyptians might have their reasons, but the funny thing about it is that if we go back to that map of Israel, so we go back to the map of Israel, you can take a look at the West Bank. So here you can look now, the West Bank makes up what's known as Judea and Samaria. And as you can see, for those of you who are Christian, you can see the Bethlehem, city of Bethlehem is right here inside the West Bank. Well, the funny thing about it is, well, I'm saying funny in terms of kind of like ironic, but the West Bank, which is primarily Palestinian held, also was pushed over or pushed to and wanted to be sent over to Jordan, which borders it on its east. And Jordan said, no, we're not going to do it. And they actually built a wall along the West Bank and along the Jordan River to prevent Palestinians from coming across in the West Bank. The same thing goes for up in the north, what they call the Golan Heights. Now you can see right here underneath where my closed captioning is going, Golan is up here. Golan was supposed to be handed over to the Syrians and possibly even to Lebanon. When all of these areas were put together by the Israelis, they essentially said, look, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, if you guys want control over these things, go ahead and take them. We don't want them. We don't want control of them. They were never taken up on the offer. And so you sit there and you have to kind of wonder, okay, if these are really Arabs helping Arabs and wanting to help Arabs, why would they, the biggest question you have to ask yourself is, why would they not want to take control of these areas? What is the purpose? What is the reason as to why they don't want it? Now, there is some suggestion, okay, that the reason for this is because it sets Israel up to be essentially the bad guy, which is what they're looking for politically, by the way. But this also brings up, according to the Washington Examiner, there's the Muslim world's humanitarian plea for the preservation of civilian life in Gaza. And here's the question now, are either sincere or cynical. And in the coming weeks, we're going to find out which it is. So the Israeli Defense Forces, as I already mentioned, advised the 600,000 plus citizens of Gaza City to evacuate on Thursday ahead of planned military ground operations against Hamas in the area. Those that want to save their life, please go south, the IDF warned. Now, keep in mind that again goes into Egypt. But here's the other piece out of all of this. The Israelis right now have shut off power, water, and other services, internet, things like that. They have taken back control. Now, keep in mind, reportedly, the Israelis have been providing the Gaza Strip with water and power and, those kinds of services over the course of time after they handed the Gaza Strip over to Hamas. And Hamas has been in charge of that since I believe somewhere around 2007 or so. Israel said, you know what, we're done. We don't even want anything to deal with it. In fact, all the Israelis that were in that area left the Gaza Strip reportedly. And so for Israel to go and shut these services off, they literally told Hamas. They said, look, if you care about your civilians and you want these services turned back up, all you have to do is release the hostages. Release the 150 or so hostages. And they aren't doing it. Hamas is interested in one thing and one thing only, and that is the optics of having civilians. In fact, they went and clearly told people in the Gaza Strip, ignore the Israeli Defense Forces, ignore their warnings, ignore what they're saying, stay where you are. And this has become a bit of a standoff, let's say, in using the civilians that are in Gaza as pawns in this game of who is going to essentially kill off the first ones first. Now, keep in mind, the Israeli Defense Forces are attempting to try and shut down Hamas in particular. And believe me, I think this time they're going to, because realistically, this is the most horrific attack on specifically Jewish people since the Holocaust itself. I mean, it has been likened to, if you were to expand and, do a proportion, they essentially are, this is like their 9/11. This is their attack. This is the most horrific attack since, like I said, the Holocaust itself. That's what everybody is saying. And yet not a single leftist Democrat or a I won't say single, but not very many leftist Democrats are standing with Israel. In fact, a lot of them are keeping either mum on the whole thing, or they are siding with the Palestinians on this. Now, one thing that is definitely clear, no matter what, if you and you can Google this, you can find this. If you look at the Hamas charter, they literally state 3 separate times within their charter that they exist to do one and only one thing, and that is to wipe the Jews off the face of the earth. That is what they want. That is their charter. That is their whole existence, is to get rid of the Jewish people. Now, this is not a group of individuals who want to live in peace, who want to protect civilians or anything else. This is part of the reason why there was so much horrific action during that last weekend, going and attacking children, babies, and all of these things. And once again, I'm just pointing out that not only does evil exist, but these people have literally no concept of rules, standards, and civility when it comes to their hatred of the Jewish people. Now, we are sitting here and looking at all of this with essentially a very myopic lens in our mind. And unfortunately, there's a group of individuals who are out there who believe that we should be extending some type of humanitarian aid. Now, keep in mind, the American government has been handing aid over to the Palestinians for decades. We have been giving them money. And the money that's being sent, which is supposed to be used for humanitarian purposes, is being repurposed to do things like the horrific attack as what you saw on Israel last week. The pipes that the money that we've provided for pipes to go do and extend, clean up their infrastructure to make it so with where these people can actually live in what we would consider in the West decent housing. The money was gone. In fact, several, as Buddy points out here, Hamas went and dug up water lines from the ground and cut up the pipes to make rocket launchers. They used the money, they bought the pipes. I mean, even if we handed them construction supplies, they used those construction supplies in order to create rocket launchers, to be able to essentially cause the most havoc and to try and kill as many Israelis as there is possible. Well, here in the U.S., of course, rather than sitting here and saying and putting pressure on the Arab countries like Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and those places to try and alleviate the refugees from the Gaza Strip that are essentially, the people who are not violent. You could say that they are in kind of a bad situation, but at the same time, none of the Arab countries want to take any part in all of this. None of the Arab countries want to help out what would be considered their fellow Arabs, I guess, is the best way to put it. But here in the New York Post, progressives here in the U.S. are calling for the U.S. to take in some of the expected 100 million Gaza refugees. Now, here's the problem that I have with this is, once again, we're dealing with sitting here and looking at, we already have almost 2.5 million illegal immigrants that have come into our country and have been released into our country. Now we're going to take in essentially 1 million Gaza refugees. Now, one of the problems that we have, even like when we were leaving Afghanistan, for an example, our vetting process for those people who were leaving Afghanistan it wasn't very clear and it wasn't very effective. And so we more than likely have already terrorist cells here in the U.S. that are planning things. And you're expecting us to go into Gaza and pull out what is considered to be civilians. There was a report, Mark Levin made a comment on it on his radio program recently. Hamas is turning over their uniform, whatever that uniform happens to be, and they're turning over into civilian clothes. And so what are they doing? They are essentially trying to hide within the civilian population. This is part of the problem that you have with essentially unconventional warfare in this particular situation. But we have, we've dealt with stuff like this before. We have done it in Korea. We did it in Vietnam. We had troubles. You have troubles identifying who is friend or foe in these kinds of situations. And so, realistically, for us to go and do this, unless we set up some sort of an encampment somewhere where we keep all of these people, we just settle them in a like a wide open space of nothing and hold them militarily, I don't see the benefit necessarily to know whether or not these people coming out of this place are actual civilians who really need the humanitarian aid, or Hamas terrorists that are coming out, from this place. Now, thank goodness we have some cooler heads prevailing in our government. Now, Republicans, keep in mind, Republicans may not be the answer to your problem, all right, but Democrats are definitely the cause of them. Well, here in Breitbart, House Republicans introduced the Gaza Act to stop Biden from importing Palestinians to the U.S. Now, for those of you that have a memory a little bit longer than your average Democrat, there's this place called Dearborn, Michigan, that in Dearborn, Obama took in a bunch of Somali refugees and settled them in Dearborn, Michigan. If anybody has watched Dearborn, Michigan, especially in some of those areas around Dearborn, like what happened with 9/11, and even in now, if you go, you can search up and look. These people hate America. They hate Christians. They hate Jews. They want nothing to do with any of them. They want Sharia law and Islam to be the religion of choice across the entire globe. These people just want to kill you. They hate you. They hate us. And this is a level of hate that the left embraces when it's convenient for them, but doesn't realize that they are essentially opening up the doors for Americans to be killed. Now, thankfully, they have introduced this Gaza Act. I don't know if it's actually going to pass. I'm kind of hoping that it will, because there should be some sort of a bipartisanship, honestly, for this. And it was, let's see, Representatives Tom Tiffany from Wisconsin and Andy Ogles from Tennessee. They are introducing legislation that would stop President Joe Biden's administration from importing Palestinians to the United States to be resettled in American communities. Folks, if this were to occur, we would have absolutely no way of knowing whether or not these people coming in are actual friendly civilians who would be willing to assimilate into America and take on America's values system, or whether or not they are extremist individuals who are looking to kill as much as they can. This is not good. And I mean, as much as my heart goes out to those civilians who actually are caught in the crossfire, this is not good. We have to accept the fact that we are not going to be able to save everyone, and that unfortunately it's their decision-making process that could be potentially challenging this kind of scenario. Now, what happens, or what kind of ramifications do we have when it comes to, assuming, of course, that Iran actually did coordinate with Hamas to get this going? What sort of ramifications that we had, excuse me, cholera, as Mark Levin says, what sort of ramifications do we actually have? What sort of actions do we have available to us to prevent something like this, to prevent the money that we just sent? Remember, this is $6 billion, with a B, billion dollars, going over and providing even more attacks. Well, again, the House Republicans, telling you, this is part of the reason why I'm happy to be a part of the Republican Party rather than the Democrat Party. But House Republicans, according to the Epoch Times, 107 House Republicans are bringing a bill to refreeze the $6 billion in Iranian funds. Now, if Joe Biden had any sense of Americanism and justice and decency, he would have done this without being urged. He would have basically said, look, you guys, you effed up. You guys screwed up. And so, yeah, I'm refreezing that $6 billion. Now, here's the problem, though. That $6 billion is sitting in a bank in Qatar. Qatar is housing, and I have this on good authority, is housing the leaders of Hamas, allowing them to stay in Qatar in what is essentially high-end hotels with all the amenities as much as possible. And so this freezing this money may or may not make any kind of effect, but this is essentially the House Republicans are looking to bring a bill to try and refreeze that money again. For those of you that don't understand basic money aspects, I mean, let's just say, like I was saying on my last episode, let's just say that you get a bonus. You get a bonus, from your business. And that bonus, that you're getting, say, $10,000. Well, what does that $10,000 do for you? I mean, you may not have the cash right now, but and let's say your boss says, look, you can't use that $10,000 for anything other than, let's just say, food or medical supplies. Okay. Well, money that you have put aside for your grocery bill now is freed up because you know that you have this $10,000 sitting in the bank somewhere, that it's coming in. I don't care whether or not I'm going to, it doesn't matter to me whether you've told me or my boss has told me, hey, you're going to use this money for food. No, but I don't care, because that money that I was holding off for food is now getting reallocated for other things. So yes, even though I go ahead and use that money for food, I'm keeping with that agreement, assuming that they actually do. Now, keep in mind, Iran basically said, we're going to use it for however we want. We're going to use it, whatever we want and however we want. But the reality of the entire situation here is that even if we could refreeze this money, that all will depend on whether or not Qatar actually follows through. And Qatar is sympathetic to Hamas and sympathetic to the Palestinians. And so this, again, Biden has no sense of foreign policy whatsoever, and he has gone and stuck his foot into it again. Speaking of sticking his foot into it, this came out today from the Daily Wire. And this, remember what I said, World War III is going to have 3 theaters of operations: Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Well, here's a challenge. Here's one that's coming. Biden admin warns lawmakers another country might be about to get invaded. Yeah. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, total loser, reportedly warned some U.S. lawmakers last week that Azerbaijan could soon invade Armenia. Politico, this is the kicker. Politico, left-wing rag. Politico reported that the Biden administration is concerned that the conflict in the Middle East could soon spread after Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, whatever, made recent remarks that he will retake the region by force after he invaded the Nagorno-Karabakh region last month. So he's already on the warpath. Well, I had to take a look. I was like, wait a minute, Azerbaijan, where the heck is that? Well, here's the here's the map. It's on the west side of the Caspian Sea. It's north of Iran and just on the edge of Turkey. Now, if you look at this map, we have the yellow, the bright yellow indicating Azerbaijan. And just to the west of Azerbaijan is an orange area known as Armenia. And so now you have which, by the way, there's a little pink area inside of the yellow area that, or at least it looks pink to me, that is the area that the Azerbaijani president had already talked about taking over. So he's already planned on taking over. Once he gets that region under control, he's just going to march west This is the Azerbaijani president. He's going to march west and go take back Armenia. Now, Russia is to the north of Azerbaijan, as well as the former Russian state of Georgia is also up in that area. So Russia is to the north, Iran is to the south in this region. But this is the Middle East. And when you have a police entity such as what the U.S. has consistently been since World War II, okay, we have been acting as the world police. But there's one thing that we cannot get away from, and that's the fact that we can, regardless of all our power and might, we can get stretched thin, folks. And if we get stretched thin, that's going to cause us some serious issues when it comes to trying to prevent these types of things to break down. And it's not like Russia and China are going to do anything about it. I mean, Russia was our supposed ally in defeating the Nazis in Nazi Germany in the 1940s, but early 1940s. But there's no guarantee that Russia is going to do anything with this. And certainly China is probably just licking their lips, because if America gets stretched thin, we're not going to be able to cover all of these areas. Especially if you haven't noticed, but the United States Navy had a birthday just this past week. But they also have not and are not expected to hit their recruiting marks in any category. So we don't have enough people. We don't have enough young folks to come out and do this. All right. Let me go ahead and take a quick break and tell you about my wonderful logo gear store. If you go, and you can kind of see it up at the top black bar there, you can sort of see it. If you go to store.whiskeymusings.online, you can get great logo gear and motto gear. I have a motto. I use it every time I come on. It's in my title. It says that when I drink, I think. And you can go to this store. You can get t-shirts and drink glasses and all kinds of stuff with that motto, or my Whiskey Musings logo across the board. You can head on over to store.whiskeymusings.online and get some great Christmas gifts, which in fact I am giving you 15% off of your order if you head to store.whiskeymusings.online and use promo code Christmas, all caps, at checkout. You can get 15% off your order by using promo code Christmas at store.whiskeymusings.online. Pick yourself up a Christmas gift for you today, or maybe just get it for another fan. You guys can hand out gifts for one another. But again, go to store.whiskeymusings.online and use promo code Christmas, all capital letters, at checkout to get 15% off of your order. And that is a early Christmas gift from me to you. And of course, I thank you for, if you decide to go and buy something, purchase something that supports the show, I do appreciate it. All right, enough with world politics. Even though the world is going to hell in a handbasket really fast, we also have our wonderful American politics going to hell in a handbasket ever since Joe Biden took his oath of office, which he has yet to actually uphold, in my opinion. But I'm not the only one that has a has a problem with Biden, and especially not the whole Biden and his criminality and so on and so forth. This came out, this article came out in Newsmax. It actually points to a poll done by the Associated Press that a majority says that Biden is at least unethical and potentially did illegal things. A plurality, they call it, says that he did illegal things. Well, if you've lived under a rock for the last, 2.5 years, you already know that Joe Biden is screwing everything up in America. In fact, just watching this program, you would know that. But apparently the word is starting to get out, folks. It really is. So ethical concerns are casting a shadow over President Joe Biden as he seeks re-election amid ongoing investigations into his son Hunter and an impeachment inquiry, with a poll showing that 35% of U.S. adults believe the president himself has done something illegal. That number should be greater than that, people. That number needs to be bigger than that. I'm kind of sad to think, excuse me, to think that it isn't greater than this, but hey, you know what? 35%, that's almost 2/3, or that's almost 1/3. But apparently an additional 33, according to the poll, say they think the Democrat president behaved unethically, but not illegally. I personally think he did both. And 30%, only less than 1/3, say that Joe Biden did nothing wrong, according to the poll. It's a results of a survey by the Associated Press and NORC, Center for Public Affairs Research. And yeah, so I mean, we're getting there. It's, the movement on the meter for this is moving slow, as it always does when you've got brainwashed morons who don't want to see the truth right in front of their face. However, it's getting there, folks. It is getting there. Hopefully it will accelerate moving forward into the 2024 election. Okay. But if you really want to take a look at what a lot of people are saying is the hypocrisy and the left-leaning Department of Justice, meaning that they allow certain people to get away with stuff just because they have a D behind their name or lean Democrat or are part of what is considered the Democrat Party. Nothing, I mean, not as if you haven't already seen and have been convinced of this already. Here's yet another nail in that coffin. Yet another nail in that coffin. For those of you that don't know, Bob Menendez has, he's been accused of doing political favors for Egypt, by the way, during his term in office. And so Jonathan Turley has written an opinion piece in the New York Post, where Bob Menendez, he's asking the question, is being charged as a foreign agent. So why not Hunter Biden? Now, we all know, if you watch this program, if you watch any of the other pundits, Hunter Biden has advocated for foreign entities within the American government using his dad as cover. That's literally what he has done. And so Hunter Biden has committed and never registered as a foreign agent, by the way, never once registered as a foreign agent. There's no record of him registering or even his business partners registering as foreign agents. All of that being said, neither did Bob Menendez. And so now Bob Menendez is actually being charged as a foreign agent. So why aren't they going after Hunter Biden for FARA violations? So here in the piece, The Justice Department this week hit Senator Bob Menendez, who is a Democrat from New Jersey, with a superseding indictment, meaning that he was already indicted on one thing and they added charges to it, which they can do legally. They can do that. But they added a superseding indictment that was including a new but all too familiar charge, being an unregistered foreign agent under the FARA Act, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And Jonathan Turley says, I cannot recall another sitting member of Congress being criminally charged as a foreign agent. He continues, yet even if this is the first such case, the charge has been freely used by the Justice Department in all but one case. Hunter Biden. You guessed it. The indictment accuses Menendez of being a foreign agent on behalf of Egypt. It's also charging, the DOJ is also charging Menendez's wife, Nadine, and an Egyptian-American businessman known as Wael Hana. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. But anyway, apparently they supposedly discussed various foreign policy priorities at one of their dinners. And Nadine, Bob's wife, was quoted as asking her Egyptian counterparts, what else can the love of my life do for you? The government is apparently alleging that the couple agreed to have Menendez use his power and authority to facilitate such sales and financing to Egypt. In addition to other benefits, the government alleges that Hana promised to put Nadine on the payroll of his company in a low or no-show job. Now, okay. So this guy essentially went and did the exact same freaking thing as what Hunter Biden is being accused of, or what the heck? Hello, dumbasses. What the hell are you doing over at the Justice Department? Obviously, Hunter Biden is being protected. What part of Hunter Biden being protected do you guys not understand? This is an obvious use of power by the Department of Justice in order to cover up for the vice president's son. In this, I just cannot believe this. This is just this is a huge overreach of power. If you honestly wanted a Justice Department that is equal and fair across the board, Menendez would be charged. Hunter Biden would be charged. Hunter's business associates would be charged. In fact, it might even go so high as to go after Joe Biden for FARA violations. This is nuts. I cannot even believe this. And what's funny, what really would put the cake on this, honestly, what really would put the icing on the cake on this is if Menendez was actually a Republican. He's not. He's a freaking Democrat. So they're charging him as a Democrat, and they won't even go after Hunter Biden. Oh my Lord. I cannot even understand this. What the hell? If you want any kind of proof or evidence, it's right freaking here. It's right here in front of you. If you're a leftist listening to the show, if you even pick up on this show, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you right now. Okay. You are living in a dream world if you think that the Department of Justice is not a left-leaning, left-protecting organization. There's just no way. There is absolutely no way. This just infuriates me. Why? They're God. As Buddy puts out, they know, Whiskey. They know. God, these people, just, I can't even believe. And especially, you know, what I really shake my head at, honestly, is all the freaking morons who sit here in the Democrat Party and are saying, oh yeah, there's no Hunter Biden story. There's no there. Well, if there's no there, what the are you going after freaking Menendez for? Ugh. Anyway. All right. Well, I gotta calm down for a second. Okay. So we all know that the Republicans, you know, in the House, they kind of did this yet to be seen, whether it's going to be positive or negative thing in the House of Representatives by getting rid of Kevin McCarthy. Well, so here's the thing. They put up originally, just to catch everybody up here. Originally, they went ahead and put up Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan as the two potential candidates. They held a closed door vote, and Steve Scalise edged out Jim Jordan by a few votes. And by a few, I think it was like 10 to maybe 15. Okay. Now, last week, right after my episode, my last episode, I think I pointed it out on the last episode, Steve Scalise has stepped down. Okay. So that put the Republicans back on the drawing board. And so they went back into another private vote, we'll call it a closed door vote. And they have put forward Jim Jordan as the choice for speaker. Now, the funny thing about it is, or I can't say the funny thing, but the oddness about this is there was actually another couple of people that threw their hat into the ring. And one of them in particular is sitting there thinking that, hey, if Jim Jordan can't make it, then maybe I have a shot. And I'll tell you about those two in just a minute. But first, there is apparently a high bar for Jim Jordan, according to Just the News. He's got to pick up 60. Yes, that's 60 more votes to win the speakership on the House floor. Apparently, and that number, by the way, since this article came out, that number is actually dwindled down to 55 now. I'm being told, reportedly. But they are planning on the House is planning on reconvening at 6 p.m. on Monday, without, to make a proposal, or they're reconvening on Monday. Sorry. And there's also a proposal out there as well, not just for Jim Jordan to potentially be the speaker, but also, for the Representative McHenry, who is currently sitting in the, speaker pro tempore, however you pronounce that. And that is also gaining steam. Potentially, if they can't get Jim Jordan, they might put in, Representative McHenry as a possibility. But Jim Jordan won the speaker nomination on Friday with 124 over 81 over Representative Austin Scott, who threw his name in at the last minute. Okay. As well as another guy that I'll tell you about as well too. Now Jordan previously lost to Scalise of 113 to 99. So it was 14 votes that did it. But the Louisiana Republican backed out of the running due to a lack of votes to win what is considered the simple majority on the House floor. And again, just to remind everybody, that means we need 217 on the House floor. So apparently enough Republicans stood out and said, no, I'm not going to vote like Lauren Boebert. I will not vote for Steve Scalise. Now, for those of you who may not be paying attention, reportedly, Steve Scalise would have been not that much different than Kevin McCarthy. Now, keep in mind, this is all being done without the Democrats, because the Democrats, of course, want to have their man, Hakeem Jeffries, who I keep going after on X a lot because that guy is an idiot. But that being said, they're trying, obviously, between now and the end of, or they're reconvening on Monday. They are trying desperately to get enough votes to hit the 217 mark for Jim Jordan to come in as Speaker of the House. Now, Politico put out this piece on it, and hopefully I'll get to that here in just a second, but they are running scared. And they actually think that Jim Jordan might go, what they're saying is that Jim Jordan originally was kind of the hardliner, and he's sort of softened over time. Well, now they're trying to suggest that Jim Jordan might be going back to his hardline stance, which, to be honest with you, I actually would like a hardline stance, because, I mean, again, you get a guy that's kind of waffling, and I view this in politics too. I prefer the hardliners. I prefer the ones that basically say, look, I'm a principled individual. This is what I'm doing, and you're going to vote for me because you agree with me and how I want to vote. And that's part of the reason why I can never be in politics, because I wouldn't necessarily be able to negotiate over specific things that would violate my principles. Having a principled person in politics is an oxymoron, which is why Democrats are always unprincipled, leftist morons. Anyway, so apparently the original tally, or the final tally, was 152 to 55 for Jim Jordan on the House floor. And so he needs to pick up 65 votes. Well, the thing about it is that 65 votes is actually shrunk down to 55. And this is what Politico has been scared of, because they think that a lot of Republican representatives, that Jim Jordan will go at them from a hardline stance and potentially deal with those middle of the road Republicans who are kind of wishy-washy, and get enough votes to actually be speaker, which is one of their fears. Well, if Jim Jordan doesn't make it, there is another one waiting in the wings, provided that McHenry doesn't get in there. So Mike Johnson is now being floated. He's a Republican from Louisiana. He is being floated as a potential interested candidate if Jordan is short of the 217 votes, according to a source familiar. Now, of course, keep in mind, this is an anonymous source, but this is the Washington Examiner, so there you go. But Johnson, who is Mike Johnson, who is the vice chairman of the House Republican Conference, said on Friday that he'll support Jordan for the job, but that he might be thinking about entering the race, even though he said on X, formerly known as Twitter, that he has decided at this time not to enter the race, but will defer to one of my closest friends and brothers, Jim Jordan. So there's a couple other people apparently in this that potentially could be jumping in to the race, should Jim Jordan not be able to garner enough votes to actually become Speaker of the House. Also keep in mind too, that even though Kevin McCarthy made the comment that he was not going to run again, there's now some rumors running around that he could potentially jump back in. And if he does, that's going to be a bit of a problem, because there's a possibility that he could have worked something out. If he does, there's a possibility that he could have worked something out and with the Democrats to help support him moving forward. And so that, yeah, we've got a problem with all of this. I mean, this is just a horrible situation. Matt Gaetz, whether you like him or not, he did what he did. He got what he wanted, apparently. And so now we have to deal with it. The key here, though, is that what's next? What do we have next? Now, if we end up with Jim Jordan as the Speaker of the House, then it was a win. If we end up with a Democrat or another wishy-washy rhino Republican as Speaker of the House, it's not a win. In fact, it would have been a loss, especially if the Democrat won the Speaker of the House. Speaking of losing, there is a complete loser who is trying to push the idea that Bidenomics is actually helping people. So I don't know if anybody watches this. I mean, I like economics a little bit. I like to look and listen. I'm not that deep into it to be, open about my situation. But considering the fact that right now, a lot of Americans are running paycheck to paycheck and are running out their savings and so on and so forth in order to just plain live, this is a big deal. And this is one of the worst presidents ever to essentially be in the White House, in my personal opinion. Well, Krugman, I think it's Paul Krugman. Let me just make sure. Yeah, Paul Krugman, who is an economist. He basically put out on somewhere. He was talking. I think he was talking on a show somewhere, and he put out that the war on inflation is over if you take out things like food, fuel, and cars. Well, Mr. Krugman, and I'm speaking directly to you, sir, Mr. Krugman, you cannot take those pieces out. Food, fuel, and cars are what the majority of Americans actually use in order to live. So don't sit here and tell us that the war on inflation is over. It's a bunch of bullshit. Okay? The war on inflation will be over when inflation is back down to below 2%, like it was when Biden took office. And when prices are down to a point where we're no longer being hit with all of this price hikes and all of this crap that's causing our meager wage increases that Biden keeps touting to be sucked up by price increases. You are an idiot if you think that inflation is over. Complete idiot. I cannot believe this. I can't believe how many people have turned into morons that fast. In fact, honestly, I'm not outside of the realm of possibility here, but the Daily Fetched pointed this out. A record 49% of Americans say living standards are eroding under Biden. They are. There is no question on this. People can't buy houses. They can barely afford rent and food and fuel. And it's made worse by Democrat morons like my governor here in the state of Washington, who adds on taxes on top of already high prices. It's a bunch of crap. It really is. Our particular situation, if anything else, the Biden administration and all Democrats who are up for re-election in 2024 should be ousted for this main reason alone: the economy. I'm struggling to understand how anyone in any sense of the word can sit there and say that our economy is doing great. I just don't get it. I don't get it. And that, my friends, is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Do me a favor, if you like the program, head on over to Rumble, rumble.com, and search up the Whiskey Musings Broadcast channel. Hit that green follow button. You can also follow me on YouTube, Facebook, as well as Twitter. I transmit to all 4 of those. You can also follow my podcast, the audio portion of the program, which covers Spotify, iHeartRadio, and a few other outlets as well. So we will see you guys next time on Wednesday for the next Whiskey Musings broadcast. Have a great weekend, everybody, and be safe out there. We'll see you on Wednesday, folks. Good night, everyone.
The Whiskey Musings broadcast is produced by Active Eye Media, LLC. All rights reserved.